Ole, 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 feeling hot, hot, hot. Welcome to Beanie Composter. When I started filming these in the winter, it seemed a great idea, but I suppose I've committed to it now, so I've got to carry on wearing it. In today's video, I'm going to show you what we're doing with the 60-day compost we moved out of the hot bin a few days ago. This is exactly all the compost that I took out of the hot bin that day. I've just left that round the back of the garage, just sitting there for the last week or so. But in that week the weather's just got, really hot, so stuff that's sort of a bit more exposed is starting to dry out, and the other stuff stayed quite moist because it's, quite shaded there. If you are emptying your hot bin and you don't know what to do with your compost, then this is going to give you a couple of ideas on what I do with, the stuff we're taking out. So generally I just leave it in a bag, like an old gardening bag, and I keep those for later on during the year for mulching and things like that. With these, you need to try and keep them quite moist, so keep them well covered up and keep the moisture in there, especially if you've got worms in there. If it's raining, then open them up and let some water get in there, but make sure there's holes for the water so it doesn't get waterlogged, but keep it moist. One problem with storing moist compost in bags like that is you can get things like here, so you get the dreaded old slugs and that tend to go in there. And if you've got like the large slugs that are laying eggs, then I have said in previous videos you can end up with a load of slug eggs in there. If you do find the odd slug in your compost and you pick them out, then if your hot bin is working, between 40 and 60, you can put them in there, and that'll just, steam them and finish them off. If you don't like being cruel to animals, then I suggest take them to like the local park and that. But if you put them in your garden, if you're making compost, then you're probably quite passionate about your gardening, so you probably don't want loads of snails and slugs eating all your plants anyway. So either do it in the composter and get more nutrition in your garden, or just take them away to the park. And if you've got kids, collect them all in a bucket, and they love taking those away. So this time of the year, when it's, generally it's going to be dry for a little while and we've got no rain in sight, what I do is, for this, I can just literally just spread it out on a tray, like, something like this. We've got an old guinea pig tray which is really useful for this sort of thing, but if you don't have that, you could just lay out, like I said about getting some tarpaulin for, emptying your composters. So you could use, get a big piece of tarpaulin and lay it out on that. If you don't have the space to do this, or you think, well, it's quite unsightly for a few days, then, like I say, you can just store it like that. One problem with drying your compost out like this is all the worms that are in there are gonna either get, dried up, eaten, and that's maybe not what you want to do. So if you can maybe just sort of like get as many out as you can, it's always a good idea. If you're just going to keep some compost in a bag, then just put the worms in there and carry on living in there and decomposing that down. But if you do spread it out like this and dry it out, you're going to have things like robins, blackbirds coming down, and they'll be taking, like, if there are slug eggs in there, they'll take those out, and if there are a few worms, then you are feeding the birds as well. So it's a win-win situation for everyone apart from the worms and the slug eggs.
So what if I don't want any slugs and snails coming into the compost at the first place? So you take it off the composter and I want to use it for my plants. without slugs or slugs eggs? What do I do?
So for me, I don't think there's any guarantee that you wouldn't have any slug eggs or snail eggs in the compost, you know, even if it was running at, you know, at the hot composting temperatures. I know the hot composting websites say that kills all eggs and that, but for me, I still think you could have them in there, so I'd be wary about that. But to minimize the risk completely, what I would say is I would get some good quality old sort of compost bags, or even, you know, some black bin liners that are heavy duty, and I'd put the compost straight in there, and I'd, you know, wrap that up really tight, so tie it up so it's, you know, there's no way that any sort of slugs from outside could get into there. So make sure when you do put all your compost in there, you've put a few holes for aeration in it, you know, just little holes with a knife or a pair of scissors, and make sure the compost is moist so that the worms survive and, you know, they can carry on decomposing the starch. But generally I think most of the slugs and that come via externally, as in, like, you know, when you've got that in a damp place, then slugs will come up and sort of in the crevices, they sort of bury themselves in there and they maybe get inside that way. So for me, if you know, minimize that risk by storing it somewhere, say like in a tray like this in a shed, so there's no way of slugs, you know, entering and going into there, that would be a, you know, a way of trying to prevent that from happening.
Oh.
Good.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
I've just been going through this compost that we've taken out, and just to show to you, as I'm sieving through it, I've just found a few, like in an old mango seed, there's a slug in there, and a couple of others as well. And that's just me, you know, with this going through, you know, through it all to get some like the bigger sticks out. But that just shows you that you can't guarantee that there's going to be no slugs in your compost. Okay guys, if anyone's wondering what I'm doing, I lost a pound, so I haven't been able to sleep for the last 2 days. So I thought I'd better check all the compost to see if I dropped it in there. The missus is laughing like crazy because she knows it's true.
It is.
But anyway, yesterday in the video we showed you, I laid out the, you know, the 60-day compost out on the pavement here just to dry out. We had a tiny bit of rain, like a shower last night, but not really anything to affect it. It's dried out a bit, but it's still sort of moist. I've just grabbed this black bag to store the compost in that's just been sitting around the side of the garage, and this is what I'm talking about. We've got, you know, slugs on the outside that have been sort of in the creases, and then if you look inside, you probably won't see with the camera, but we've also got, you know, a few baby slugs in there as well. So this is what I'm saying about, you know, when you're putting your compost to store it, make sure everything is meticulous in terms of you checked it, there's no slugs in there and things that could, you know, potentially, you know, cause you problems in the future with your compost. You don't want it to completely dry out because that would just be bad for the worms and all the, you know, bacteria that's in there. So make sure you keep it kind of moist, but not, you know, mega wet, just enough so you can sieve it. Now as I sieve it, if I see like worms and that, I just put them, you know, back in it. You know, I don't normally do this way because I find it's quite time consuming, if you're retired or this is all you want to do all your life, then, you know, give it a go. But if you want to, you know, do this procedure, then you're going to get better compost, as in final, without all the, you know, bulking agent that hasn't broken down. And all this bulking agent that is coming out, you can reuse back in your compost. So actually this is a good way of, you know, if you don't have that much bulking agent, then it gives you a chance to reuse it, and probably you could, you know, use it, you know, 2 or 3 times again, depending how big it is. So this bit that we're sieving through, I'm just going to put in this black truck for now. It's still nice and moist, so that's good. If it has dried out too much, I would put some, you know, a little bit of water in there. I'm not going to store it in this truck, I'm going to transfer it to bags, but I'm just using this to start with. If you are storing your compost, then you need to make sure you keep it, number one, moist, but not too wet that it's, you know, it gets anaerobic, there's no air. So first and foremost, you need to make sure what you're putting it in has like holes in. So if you're using a bag like this has already got pre-made holes, which is ideal. But as I've said, put a, you know, get a knife or a pair of scissors and just put a few holes in so you can get the aeration still in there, because the compost needs air to, you know, for the worms and the bacteria to survive. So if you were going to store it in, say, like an old dustbin, you know, the black dustbins, I don't know, we have them in the UK before they bought in all these wheelie bins, but you can still get them to store stuff in. They're ideal if you're going to store, you know, a lot of it in the garden. Make sure you put some holes with a drill in them, just so you've got that air. And you will need to sort of occasionally make sure it's moist enough and keep turning it, because it will compact right at the bottom. So whenever you're storing your compost, if you're going to store it for a long time, then you will need to occasionally take it out, give it a good stir up, put it back in the bag, and just so you get that aeration, and also, you know, it's not getting too moist in one area, it's just all being mixed together. It took a bit of effort to get it to this stage, but I think you'll find if you want to use that for maybe potting and that, it's definitely well worth it. And also, you know, this here is exactly what we got out of that 60-day compost. So from the start of the video, you know, all that was sieved through the sieve, and then we've got, you know, a good almost 3 buckets worth of bulking agent that we can reuse in the Hotbin. And the other benefit of sieving it is, you know, we got out all that wouldn't, you know, plastic and bits of, you know, labels that just go in there by mistake, and you can, you know, eliminate that from your compost. You know, if you have emptied your hot bin and you're not going to use your compost for mulching, at this time of year, we're sort of mid-June, it's not so easy to put mulch around, because, you know, all your borders and that are quite compact with all your plants. So you're probably going to be thinking, you know, what can I do with the compost? How should I store it? Well, this stuff, it might look dead to you, but it's actually living. So it needs some sort of care and attention when you store it. First and foremost, you're going to need air in that compost. So you're going to need to store it in something that's got air, you know, air is able to get into it. So I did say in the beginning of this video, you know, bags with holes in. I said earlier on in the video that, you know, we're going to store ours in this plastic bag. It's got holes in. I'm pretty sure this was the bag that came with the Hotbin Composter with all the bulking agent when we first got it. So I've just literally turned that inside out and dried it out and made sure there's no slugs or snails present. So I'm going to turn that back to the right way. It is a bit damp because on Friday it was actually quite wet, so it rained for quite a while. And then we're going to just tip that back in, just to sort of give it a mix around, because we had all that rainfall on it, and you know, I just want to get it mixed together. As you can see there, we've got, you know, some worms. It's nice and crumbly and keeps the moisture nice, so really nice for using. But if you do want to store it, this is actually, you know, obviously there's loads of worms in there, so you can see it's living, but you've also got bacteria and that, so if it dries out, all that will die out and it, you know, it won't be the same. In here we can see, you know, all the eggshells that have just sort of crushed down. They actually give it, you know, nice texture as well. So we're, you know, we're not mega wet, you know, it's not, you know, I can push that together and it, you know, clumps into a nice ball, but it's not, you know, completely soggy, it's not dripping with water, it's, you know, nice and crumbly, but it will hold itself together when you sort of just gently clump it together. I mean, I don't want to squash all the worms and that, but there you can see it holds itself together, but, you know, crumbly as well. So you don't want this soaking wet, and you don't want it, you know, completely dry, so it's just like, you know, dust. That's our 60-day compost sieved and all bagged up now. And if you're going to store that in you know, somewhere inside like a shed, or, you know, your garage, or a, you know, basement, I would advise you to put this into something else, so, you know, it's not going to leak out all over your floor and things like that. And then, you know, if it's stored like that, make sure you've still got some air going, you know, into it. And also, if you're going to store that for a long time, every couple of months or so, I would just tip that out, give it a stir up, put it back in, and make sure, you know, you've got enough moisture in there. If you are going to store this outside, if it's like really heavy rain, you don't want loads of rain going in there, because that's going to just make it go completely soggy, and all your nutrients are going to just seep out the bottom all over, you know, wherever you've stored it, and not into the actual place you want it to go. So just be mindful when you store it outside that it's kept covered up but it's still moist, and you've got enough, you know, holes around to make sure there's enough air getting into it. But I would check it, you know, occasionally if you are going to store it for a long time. Okay guys, we're back on the bench for a summary. I'm going to be honest with you all, I did tell a little white lie in the video today, so that 60-day compost, that wasn't all of it that I showed at the very beginning. I was sort of having a search around the Hotbin earlier on, and I noticed this bag here, which came out of it as well, which to be totally honest with you, I just couldn't be bothered to, you know, sieve all that, because we'd had rain, and, you know, it was just, you know, a lot of hard work to try and get that done for this video. But I think if we'd have sieved that, we would have had a, you know, definitely the 3 buckets of bulking agent to reuse, and that would have probably been, you know, pretty much almost full to the top. So not a lot of difference there, but this video has shown you how, you know, this is, which has just come straight out of the, you know, hot bin. It's got all, you know, your wood bits of roses, or, you know, bones, whatever's left in there. And if you do sieve it, you are going to get to this sort of, you know, nice crumbly and easier to use compost, but as I've said, it is a lot of hard work, so you have to weigh up the pros and cons with that. If you have got a massive garden, and you want to do this, or you've just got this one and you're looking at ideas for storing it, then I would say, if you've got the space, then maybe have one of those big Dalek composters that you can just put this straight into, and that can just carry on decomposing and breaking down naturally at its own pace, and when you want to take it, you can just take some out of it. But if you're like us and you've got a small garden and you haven't got a lot of places where you can store it all, then either use it straight away, or just sieve it like that and store it in the bags, and it will be fine for 6 months or maybe longer. I hope this video helps you out. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, happy composting and enjoy.